In this video, I'll be showing you the top 10 Pokemon in my Pokemon GO collection. Now every Pokemon on this list is not necessarily the absolute best, but these are my favorite Pokemon that I collected over the years. They either have sentimental value, are the Pokemon I use the most, or they are the rarest Pokemon in my collection, or there is a great story behind them. I've been wanting to make this list for a long time now, as I've accumulated so many great stories while playing Pokemon GO over the years, and I would love to share them with my audience. So what I'm going to do in this video is tell you my top 10 favorite Pokemon in my collection and give you the story behind each of them. But of course, your favorite Pokemon might be quite different from my list, so be sure to share your favorites down below in the comments. Right, so with that said, let's get right into it. So the first Pokemon I want to talk about is my Shundo Sunglasses Blastoise. Without a doubt, this is probably the ultimate shiny trophy to most players. Not only is it extremely rare by today's standards, but it is one of the most sought after Pokemon in the game. And I have one. Now, getting this Shundo was not easy. For about 6 months, I focused all of my lucky trades on getting this particular Shundo. Fortunately, all of those lucky trades eventually paid off and I managed to pick it up. I'm honestly relieved that I was able to get it because most of my friends were starting to run out of shiny sunglasses Squirtles. If you want yourself this Shundo, then realize that it is one of those shinies that is in very limited supply. You could only get it from research tasks during the July Community Day 2018, and not a lot of players will have many for trades. You could have also got it from the Ed Sheeran event last year, but as it was a full odd shiny raid at the time, players will likely not have many to spare. Thus, I would talk with as many buddies who participated in that old community day and see if they have any that they can reserve for you with lucky friend trades. Now the next Pokemon I want to talk about is another costume Shundo in my collection, and it is this Shundo Flower Crown Chansey. So the reason why I have this Pokemon on this list is because it is my first ever wild caught Shundo that wasn't from a lucky trade, raid, or community day. This is also probably the most recent Pokemon that I caught on this list. I have to say, when you come across a shiny Pokemon in the wild, the thought of it possibly being a 100% IV before you appraise it always seems like a pipe dream. Well, that's precisely how it went down. During the Spring into Spring 2022 event, I was catching as many Chansey as I could because of the XL candies. I wanted to accumulate as much candy as I could in order to max out more of my Blisseys for gym defense. Well, since I was catching nearly every Chansey encounter, the chances of one of them being a shiny was fairly high. Turns out, the shiny that I would encounter ended up being a Hundo. I was honestly ecstatic. Not only was it a random shiny encounter, but it would end up becoming my 19th Shundo. So needless to say, there will be quite a few Shundos on this list, but this next entry is not even a high IV Pokemon. Now, I want to talk about this particular shiny Azumarill, and why I consider it among my top 10 favorite Pokemon on this list. If there was a metric for my most used Pokemon in the Go Battle League, this would certainly be at the top. Azumarill is the one Pokemon that I use in most of my Great League teams. It's basically my comfort pick. Now this particular Azumarill does not have anywhere close to the ideal IVs for the Go Battle League, but I would say it has given me the best luck in the Great League. It has proven to be such a versatile Pokemon to use, and it also has very few viable counters. If I ever hit Legend rank in the Go Battle League, chances are this Pokemon will be a major reason why I make it. Now, let's move on to a personal favorite of mine that may cause you to scratch your head, but the reason for its inclusion on this list is purely sentimental. Next up on this list is going to be this Farfetchd. I stated that this Pokemon is in my top 10 favorites for sentimental reasons. Well, the reason why I say that is because this Farfetchd is actually my first regional Pokemon that I caught outside of my home region. It is also from a time where regionals didn't make special appearances outside of their region during special events. The place where I caught this Farfetchd was in Sokcho, South Korea. This is about 2 hours east of Seoul. When Pokemon GO first came out, the game was not yet available in South Korea, but through a Google Maps loophole, it was available in one very small corner of the country in a port town called Sokcho. During my visit to South Korea, I took a small road trip out to that town with my wife and a friend, and we caught whatever Pokemon we could while out there. Honestly, I never would have visited this section of South Korea if it wasn't for Pokemon GO. Of course, I knew this would have been my only opportunity to catch Farfetchd, at least at the time I had thought so. Thus, the pressure was on towards coming across this little duck. Fortunately, I was able to find Farfetchd near the tail end of that trip, just a few hours before we had to head back to Seoul. Needless to say, this is one of those Pokemon in my collection that reminds me of the old days when Pokemon GO was much simpler. It was all about going out, exploring new places, and scouring the area for rare and unique Pokemon. This Farfetchd, and the circumstances around how it was caught, certainly represents that old sentiment. Next, let's move on to another Pokemon that has some sentimental value, which is going to be this 100% IV Rayquaza. Now the reason why I have this Pokemon on this list is not just for its raid battling capabilities. It is because I consider this my redemption hundo. Ever since Pokemon GO first came out, I was looking forward to the day that I would be able to catch a Rayquaza. The reason is because this legendary Pokemon was one of my favorites growing up playing the Game Boy Pokemon games. Of course, the dream was always to have a 100% IV of this Pokemon. Now when Rayquaza first came out, I did as many raids as I could in hopes of picking up that hundo. Out of all of the legendary Pokemon that were released at the time, I did so many more Rayquaza raids. At around my 300th raid, I finally came across a 100% Rayquaza. Of course, this was at a time where we didn't get as many Premier Balls as we do now, and my ball throwing skills were not as refined. After hitting several excellent and great curveball throws, unfortunately, the Hundo Rayquaza ran away. I was devastated. This was my chance at getting a perfect IV Rayquaza and I blew it. Well, fast forward a couple years and Rayquaza came back to raids. I was determined to pick up the 100% IV this time around. Unfortunately, I never even came across one. Fast forward again and Rayquaza came back a second time. Now this time for sure I would get the perfect IV. It was also around this time that Rayquaza was much easier as a raid boss because plenty of top tier ice type Pokemon were available. So I was doing so many more Rayquaza raids compared to before. And fortunately, one of them was a perfect IV. I was pretty nervous considering that the first time I encountered a perfect IV Rayquaza, it ran. But this time around, I actually caught it on the first ball with a critical catch. This was my redemption, and the culmination of years of regret for not catching it the first time around. Okay, so the next few Pokemon on this list are the Pokemon that I use the most in different aspects of Pokemon GO. These are my best raid attackers, gym defenders, and Team Go Rocket battlers. The first of these is going to be this 100% IV shiny Garchomp. This is the dream Pokemon for so many players. Much like how Rayquaza was among my favorite legendaries, Garchomp is among my favorite pseudo-legendaries. Probably the one Pokemon game that I played the most before Pokemon GO was Pokemon Platinum. A huge chunk of my early 20s were dedicated to this game, and one of the Pokemon that was a favorite from that game was of course a shiny Garchomp. So when Generation 4 Pokemon started getting released in Pokemon GO, one of the shinies that I really wanted was a Garchomp. Thankfully, Niantic made that possible by having Gible as a community day. I was certainly not going to get it outside of that. Now getting a Shundo of a Gible during that community day was not something I was expecting. I just wanted a really good one, and the thought of a Shundo was just not something I thought would happen realistically. But the weather boost during that day was pretty much windy the entire time, and 100% Gibles were being called out constantly in my local community. Of course, I went for as many of them as possible, and one of them ended up being a shiny perfect IV. This was a very exciting moment for me. Getting a Shundo is insane enough, but getting a Shundo of one of my all-time favorite Pokemon, that was mind-blowing. This is also a Pokemon that I use quite often, as it is a top-tier Pokemon for the Master League and the Go Battle League, as well as raid battles. As a matter of fact, out of all of my Shundos, I probably use this one the most. Needless to say, I am so happy to have this Pokemon in my collection. Now let's move on to the next Pokemon on this list, and it is going to be this maxed out Shundo Blissey. Without question, this is my go-to Pokemon for gym defense. Earlier in the video, I showed off my Flower Crown Shundo Chansey. but I'm actually a bit more fond of this one. Not only is this Pokemon the ultimate flex when it is placed in a gym, but it has reliably defended several gyms on its own, allowing me to collect so many gold gym badges. I have to say my gameplay improved tremendously after I got this Pokemon. Defending gyms has never been an issue, and this is by far one of my biggest flexes to my friends. Just like with my Shundo Sunglasses Blastoise, this was probably one of my best grabs from lucky trades as well. I mean, how many players out there have managed to pick up a Shundo Chansey, let alone two? It feels weird to say, but I do think I've had some of the best luck when it comes to Pokemon Go, and having Shundos of both Chansey and Blissey certainly proves that. All I need at this point is to hatch a Shundo Happiny, and I can complete the set. Okay, so the next Pokemon that I want to talk about is actually my first ever Shundo. It was one that I received through a lucky trade, and it's also one that I've used quite often. It's going to be none other than my Shundo Rayquaza. Now, like I've said, I've used this Pokemon so many times in this game. Not only is it one of my most useful raid and gym attackers, it is also fairly decent at nuking down most Team Go Rocket battles. There's also a level of satisfaction that I really can't describe when you use a Shundo Legendary. Speaking of which, this is in fact my only Shundo Legendary Pokemon, so needless to say it is one of my most valuable Pokemon in my collection. Hopefully I'll be able to pick up more Shundo Legendaries, but for now, this one will stay as one of my top 10 Pokemon in my collection. So now we are approaching my number 1 Pokemon in my collection, but before we get into that, let's first talk about my number 2 favorite Pokemon in that collection, and it has got to be my 98% IV Shadow Mewtwo. Without question, this is my most powerful Pokemon in my collection. For over a year since I got it, I put in every resource possible to max it out to level 50 and give it both of its legacy moves. It's probably the only Pokemon in my collection that made me grind the most. Pretty much every Stardust and every rare candy I got was dedicated towards getting the right amount of Mewtwo XL candy in order to power it up to the max level. And since it is a Shadow Pokemon, the candy and Stardust costs were much higher. Now the way I got this Pokemon was of course through Pokemon Go Fest 2020. It was probably my biggest highlight of that event, even though I lucked out and got a Shundo during that event as well. Having a high IV Shadow Mewtwo is pretty good to begin with, but having a Shadow Mewtwo with an IV this high is astronomical. I've used this Shadow Mewtwo in pretty much every aspect of Pokemon Go. Since it is one of my few maxed out Pokemon, it has even done rounds in the Master League as well. Without a doubt, this is one of my most valued Pokemon in my collection, but it doesn't take the top spot. That spot belongs to my 100% IV Riko. Now you're probably wondering to yourself why I have this Riko as the number 1 Pokemon in my collection. It's not a Shadow, or a Shundo, or even a Pokemon that is top tier. Well, actually, the primary reason why this is my most valued Pokemon is because it not only is my first ever 100% IV Legendary, but it is one that I caught on my actual wedding day. I've told this story before on my channel, but here's the gist of it. So the morning of my wedding day, I was feeling ridiculously nervous. The wedding planning process was pretty extreme for me and my wife, and there was a lot going on that day that could have gone really wrong. The wedding was happening in downtown Chicago, and me alongside the wedding party slept in a hotel near the venue. Well, on the morning of my wedding day, I was the first person to wake up among everyone. Since I was feeling so nervous, I figured I would go for a walk and play a little Pokemon Go in order to calm my nerves. Now this was around 7 in the morning, and the first raids of the day were just beginning to hatch from gyms. It just so happens that I was near a raid egg that hatched into a Riko, which was the legendary raid boss at the time. Well, I didn't expect the raid to fill up with any people, considering that it was so early in the morning, but I decided to hop in just to see. It turns out a few others were also out on a morning walk nearby, and they jumped in as well. After we all defeated it, lo and behold, it was a hundo. Now, I know that it could have been disastrous for me if I were to start off the best day of my life with a 100% IV Legendary running away, but fortunately, I was able to catch it, and the wedding day itself went off without a hitch. Thus, I've always valued this Riko, even if it fell off as the best electric type, because it represents probably the best day of my life. Alright, so with that said, that will conclude this list video. But I would love to know what your favorite Pokemon are in your Pokemon Go collection. Definitely share them down below in the comments and let's have a great discussion. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe if it's your first time here. And don't forget that little bell so you stay up to date on whenever I upload videos. And I want to give a quick shout out to my patrons on Patreon. You make this channel content possible. If you want to support this channel in any way, then do consider checking out the links in the description below. But yeah, that's going to be it. Once again, I am Jinsula. Be safe, have fun, love yourself, and I will catch you all later.